What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well. As you can see, I'm not with you today. I had some things come up, nothing huge, but I just won't be able to be there today. So I'm recording this lesson. We'll pick up right where we left off on Friday. And if you remember, one of the last things we talked about was a soliloquy. So hopefully everything's sounding all right. Microphones here should be good. Sounds good to me at least. So hopefully we'll see. All right. So the last thing, like I said, is soliloquy. We talked about it a little bit. I didn't read this over here, but and we don't have to read this over here, but it's basically where a character is on stage by themselves and they are not exactly talking to the audience. It's more like thinking out loud. So it's one way that the playwright can get across some inner monologue that the character has. It's just an easy way to do it. I don't know if Shakespeare started it, but definitely made it famous. So, and one of the last things that we read on Friday was how Anne and Peter were starting to get along. So maybe we'll see more of that today. And so you have basically like three characters here. You can see they're all in like capital letters. They're not in italics like most of the others. So you got Anne, you got Peter, and you got Dussel. And remember, Anne and Dussel share a room. So there has to be like a little dance between them. And it seems like Dussel takes the room most of the time, at least according to Anne. So remember, this is all according to Anne because this is from her diary. But there's going to be one, I'll point it out, but there's going to be one thing that isn't from Anne's point of view. So, but that's not here yet. All right, he goes out. Anne stands in the doorway looking after him. As Peter gets to his door, he stands for a minute looking back at her. Then he goes into his room. Dussel rises as he comes in and quickly passes him going out. He starts across for his room. Anne sees him coming and pulls her door shut. Dussel turns back towards Peter's room. Peter pulls his door shut. Dussel stands there, bewildered, forlorn. So a forlorn kind of look is like just kind of like dejected. So the audience could see that, basically symbolic, saying nobody really likes that guy Dussel. The scene slowly dims out. The curtain falls on the scene. Anne's voice comes over in the darkness, faintly at first, and then with growing strength. Okay, so some bad news here. We've had bad news. The people from whom Meep got our ration books have been arrested. So we have had to cut down on our food. Our stomachs are so empty that they rumble and make strange noises, all in different keys. Mr. Van Dan's is deep and low, like a bass fiddle. Mine is high, whistling like a flute. As we all stand around waiting for supper, it's like an orchestra tuning up. It only needs Tuscanini. Tuscanini. I have not heard of Tuscanini before, but you can see that is an Italian orchestra director. And it's interesting that she mentions an Italian director. I don't know if the playwright wanted to do that or if Anne did that in her diary, but to raise his baton and we be off in the ride of the Valkyries, Monday, 6th of March, 1944. And so, see, it seems like she's mentioning a German composer there. Mr. Crowler is in the hospital. Seems he has ulcers. Pym says we are his ulcers. Meep has to run the business and us too. The Americans have landed on the southern tip of Italy. Father looks for a quick finish to the war. Mr. Dussel is waiting every day for the warehouse man to demand more money. Have I been skipping around? Have I been skipping too much from one subject to the other? I can't help it. I feel that spring is coming. I feel it in my whole body and soul. I feel utterly confused. I'm longing, so longing for everything, for friends, for someone to talk to, someone who understands, someone young who feels as I do. Okay, we'll see. Like if you were to go back and read this, and I'm not saying that we are going to, There may be something going on. She's a little bit distracted. And I do have something here just because I don't think ulcers are talked about quite as much anymore, but it's not great. It can be pretty bad. So what causes an ulcer? It looks like it's mostly like bacterial infection, right? But stress. So if, you know, and we've noticed from before, Anne can be I don't know. If I had to share a room with her, at least at the beginning, she'd probably get on my nerves too. But I don't know. Trying to share this instead. Yeah, we're back here. I don't know. So maybe that is the stress. I mean, I'm sure he's under a tremendous amount of stress trying to keep everything in check. Ulcers, but not very fun, I don't think. All right, moving on. As these last words are being said, the curtain rises on the scene, the lights dim on, Anne's voice fades out. All right, here it's gonna get a little bit I don't know, a little bit uncomfortable at least for me to read some things. Let's just get to it, but I would not be happy. I would not be happy if my daughter was doing this. That's probably just because I'm an old man. Scene 2. It is evening after supper. From outside, we hear the sound of children playing. The grown ups, with the exception of Mr. Van Daan, are all in the main room. Mrs. Frank is doing some mending. Mrs. Van Daan is reading a fashion magazine. Mr. Frank is going over business accounts. Remember, he's still running the business from up there. Dussel, in his dentist jacket, is pacing up and down, impatient to get into his bedroom. Mrs. Van Daan is upstairs working on a piece of embroidery in an embroidery frame. In his room, Peter is sitting before a mirror, smoothing his hair. As the scene goes on, he puts on his tie, brushes his coat, puts it on, preparing himself meticulously for a visit from Anne. On his wall are now hung some of Anne's motion picture stars. So this was the line I was talking about. Like, this almost lets us know, almost, I don't know. I don't know if it would hold up in a court of law, but it almost lets us know that he kind of has a crush on Anne, or at least he wants to look nice for her. So, because she is going to come visit him, like a little date. But I don't know if they ever say it's like a date, but he does want to look his best. So, that's maybe not exactly from the diary because, I mean, Anne would have no idea. I don't know. That just seemed like it was a little different for me reading that. Should I make this even bigger? All right. In her room, Anne, too, is getting dressed. She stands before the mirror in her slip, trying various ways of dressing her hair. Margot is seated on the sofa, hemming a skirt for Anne to wear. In the main room, Dussel can stand it no longer. He comes over, rapping sharply on the door of his and Anne's bedroom. Anne calling to him, "No, no, Mr. Dussel, I'm not dressed yet." Mr. Dussel walks away furious, sitting down and burying his head in his hands. Anne turns to Margot. "How's that? How's it look?" "Fine." "You didn't even look." "Of course I did. It's fine." "Margot, tell me. Am I terribly ugly?" "Oh, stop fishing." "No, no, tell me." Of course you're not. You've got nice eyes and a lot of animation and a little vague, aren't you?" All right, so fishing for a compliment, she's just trying to ask her sister. Come on. She reaches over and takes a brassiere, I think that's a bra, out of Margot's sewing basket. She holds it up to herself, studying the effect in the mirror. Outside, Mrs. Frank, feeling sorry for Dussel, comes over, knocking at the girl's door. "May I come in?" "Come in, mother." Shutting the door behind her. Mr. Dussel's impatient to get in here. Heavens! He takes the room for himself the entire day. "Anne, dear, you're not going in again tonight to see Peter." "That is my intention." "But you've already spent a great deal of time in there today." So here we get a little glimpse. This photo shows the recreation of the room that Anne shared with Mr. Dussel. So all of her pictures are on the wall. Remember, Anne. "I was in there exactly twice. Once to get the dictionary, and then 3/4 of an hour before supper." "Aren't you afraid you're disturbing him?" "Mother, I have some intuition." Okay, so that right there, intuition, the ability, it says, to see the truth of something immediately without reason. So she's more or less saying, well, I think he likes it when I come in there. Then may I ask you this much, Anne, please? Don't shut the door when you go in. You sound like Mrs. Van Daan. She throws the brassiere back in Margot's sewing basket and picks up her blouse, putting it on. No, no, I don't mean to suggest anything wrong. I only wish that you wouldn't expose yourself to criticism, that you wouldn't give Miss Van Daan the opportunity to be unpleasant. Mrs. Van Daan doesn't need an opportunity to be unpleasant. Everyone's on edge, worried about Mr. Crowler. This is one more thing. I'm sorry, Mother. I'm going to Peter's room. I'm not going to let Petronella Van Daan spoil our friendship. Mrs. Van Daan hesitates for a second, then goes out, closing the door after her. She gets a pack of playing cards, sits at the center of the table playing solitaire. In Anne's room, Margot hands the finished skirt to Anne. As Anne is putting it on, Margot takes off her high heel shoes, stuffs paper in the toes so that Anne can wear them. Margot seems like a good sister, doesn't she? Margot to Anne. Why don't you two talk in the main room? It would save a lot of trouble. It's hard on Mother having to listen to those remarks from Mrs. Van Daan and not saying a word. Why doesn't she say a word? I think it's ridiculous to take it and take it. You don't understand Mother at all, do you? She can't talk back. She's not like you. It's not in her nature to fight back. Anyway, the only one I worry about is you. I feel awfully guilty about you. She sits in the stool near Margot, putting on Margot's high heel shoes. What about? I mean, every time I go into Peter's room, I have a feeling I may be hurting you. Margot shakes her head. I know if it were me, I'd be wild. I'd be desperately jealous if it were me. Well, I'm not. You don't feel badly, really? Truly? You're not jealous? Of course I'm jealous. Jealous that you've got something to get up for in the morning, but jealous of you and Peter? No. Anne goes back to the mirror. Maybe there's nothing to be jealous of. Maybe he doesn't really like me. Maybe I'm just taking the place of his cat. Oh, that's right. Moshi's still gone. She picks up a pair of short white gloves, putting them on. Wow, this is very formal, isn't it? Wouldn't you like to come in with us? I have a book. The sound of children playing outside fades out. In the main room, Dussel can stand it no longer. He jumps up, going to the bedroom, knocking sharply. Will you please let me in my room? Just a minute, dear Mr. Dussel. She picks up her mother's pink stole and adjusts it elegantly over her shoulders, then gives a last look in the mirror. Well, here I go to run the gauntlet. Okay, we should talk about this. I got a picture. Gauntlet to run. See, I can't highlight. To run the gauntlet. Literally, to pass between two rows of men who struck at the offender with clubs as he passed. Here, a series of troubles or difficulties. So this is an idiom. She's not literally running the gauntlet. I will show you a picture right there. This is from Wikipedia. So how can it be wrong? So this is a picture. Looks like this man right here has been accused of something. This person is in charge of making sure the person goes through the gauntlet. I don't know, maybe this person's in charge of this person. So basically you have like these men with a bunch of sticks. So he has to go through this, and as he does, he is going to be getting hit. Yeah. So it doesn't seem like very much fun. But in this respect, we're talking about Anne having to go from her room to Peter's room, and probably like people like Mrs. Van Daan will say something, or at least, we'll see. She says it to Anne's mother instead. All right. Few more minutes here. I don't know. Maybe we should save the date for tomorrow. Starts building the tension. All right, here I am. She starts out, followed by Margot. Dussel, as she appears, sarcastic. Thank you so much. Dussel goes into his room. Anne goes towards Peter's room, passing Mrs. Van Daan and her parents at the center table. So you can imagine the gossip. And their gossip there will be right there. My God. Look at her. Anne pays no attention. She knocks at Peter's door. I don't know what good it is to have a son. I never see him. He wouldn't care if I killed myself. So again, her being a fatalist. Peter opens the door and stands aside for Anne to come in. Just a minute, Anne. She goes to them at the door. I'd like to say a few words to my son. Do you mind? Peter and Anne stand waiting. Peter, I don't want you staying up till all hours tonight. You've got to have your sleep. You're a growing boy. You hear? Anne won't stay late. She's going to bed promptly at 9. Aren't you, Anne? Yes, mother. May we go now? Are you asking me? I didn't know I had anything to say about it. Listen for the chimes, Anne dear. The two young people go off into Peter's room, shutting the door after them. To Mrs. Frank, in my day, it was the boys who called on the girls, not the girls on the boys. You know how young people like to feel that they have secrets. Peter's room is the only place where they can talk. Talk? That's not what they called it when I was young. All right, so maybe this is starting to be a good place to stop. We got about 16 minutes in there. All right, so for the rest of the time, there is a new Anne Frank Act 2 that can be done. You can't probably get too many of the questions done yet. But if anybody hasn't finished the quiz from Friday, feel free to do that. Anne Frank Act 1 will be going into Power School very soon, so make sure you have that done. Tomorrow we have the NWAs. Nothing you can really study for. So hopefully all the reading that we've done for the entire year has helped you with the reading. They'll be reading and math this week, Tuesday and Thursday. We got a half day on Wednesday, don't we? I'm not sure what tomorrow's test is. It could be reading, it could be math, but in all honesty, it doesn't matter. You really can't study for it. Whatever you've done so far this year in math and reading will hopefully carry you through the NWA. I will be around in and out, but I will always have my phone on me. So if you have any problems, just send me an email. I will respond as quickly as I can. Please, whoever is subbing in the room, don't give them any trouble. All right.